Aloha and welcome to Hawaiian IANDS. I'm Shaun Lether, and I'm so happy that you joined us and excited for you to meet tonight's speaker, Paula Lenz. In 1983, Paula Lenz was a high-profile executive in Houston, Texas, having graduated magna cum laude at Sam Houston State University in Texas. Paula's more than 40-year career experience also involves engineering, environmental engineering, public community relations, programs, marketing, business development, and teaching. Paula was brought up a conservative Baptist and considered herself religious, but not spiritual. Everything Paula believed was changed dramatically with the sudden and shocking loss of her brother, Don, in 1983. Paula Lenz experienced direct contact with infinity, with her brother's spirit through an out-of-body experience, and has been experiencing spiritually transformative experiences ever since. These experiences have continued for the rest of her life and through today. Because of Paula's high-profile positions and the obvious fear of people thinking she was crazy, Paula waited for over 30 years until she retired to share her story. And in 2017, Paula published her book, Driving into Infinity, Living with My Brother's Spirit. She's been a speaker for a variety of organizations, including IANDS. Tonight, Paula is here to remind us that we are not forgotten by those we have loved, and they visit us more times than we would ever know. You can learn more about Paula and check out her book at paulalenzauthor.com. Welcome, Paula. It is so nice to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to see such a great group, and it's wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Well, take it away.
Okay. Well, as Shaun said, so I did finally, after many years, decide to share my story with the world. And when I retired in 2016, at that time, and of course I lived in Texas for a long time. We lived there, but then we moved to Colorado. And once I got up here, I just suddenly knew it was time to share my story. And I just sat down on my computer and started writing my book. And then within about 9 months or so, I got that published. And it just made a huge difference for me to finally share a lot of these things that had happened to me. It made me feel truly authentic in claiming this side of me that, most people knew nothing about, related to my experience and, the sense of spirituality that I felt. I was raised in the Baptist church, and, I really enjoyed going to church, but really until I had this experience with my brother, that was when I truly could understand just being spiritual and being in connection with the true spirituality of who we are in connection here. So, but let me start at the beginning, which really me was 1983. And, this is where I started in terms of writing my book, Driving into Infinity, Living with My Brother's Spirit. But so, this year marks like 39 years since my brother made his transition. My brother's name was Don. And like I said, in 2017 is when I finally decided to share my story. But my journey really began in 1982. I was 29 years old at the time. And at that time, I started having this recurring dream. And this dream was always the same. I was outside on these wide, expansive fields, and there were large crowds of people gathering there. And someone near me asked what was happening, and I replied that I heard it was the end of the world. And then everyone was looking up at the sky, And then at that time, there appeared Jesus. And in that moment, when that happened in this dream, I doubled over, almost falling down to the ground. And I was experiencing the worst pain of my life, but it wasn't physical pain. It was heartfelt suffering and agony beyond words. And as I doubled over in this dream, I just kept saying, but it isn't supposed to be this way. I thought that the end of the world was supposed to be joyous. And then this dream would end. And had absolutely no idea what this dream meant. So fast forward a year later to Friday, October the 7th, 1983. And I was attending in Houston. I lived in Houston and I was attending that day the Greek festival with many of my friends. And this was held every year at the Greek Orthodox Church that was near downtown Houston. It was a very popular and crowded event. And my husband, Michael, planned to join us there after lunch. But sooner than expected, I spotted Michael making his way through the crowd. And I was happy about that because I thought, well, he left work early and come on down to the Greek festival here. And as I smiled and waved at him, then when he got closer, I saw his face and I knew that something was terribly wrong. I had never seen him look that way. And when he finally got caught up to me in the crowds there, he put his hands on my arms and he looked straight into my eyes. And in a trembling voice, he said to me, Donnie was killed in an accident this morning. And his face just crumpled as he spoke the words. And when I was told, I just had this vision that I was seeing of the earth just falling, just shattering at my feet. And then I just slumped down to the ground in the middle of this huge crowd and was just screaming, no, no, no. And that day, I understood what my recurring dream was conveying. And it was showing me the setting that I was going to be in, which this was at this church, this Greek Orthodox church, and my emotional reaction to the news of my brother's death. And prior to that, I'd never had any precognitive dreams. But my feelings over this loss, I was completely destroyed by this whole thing. My brother was 4 years younger. We'd grown up together. I have a sister. She's 10 years younger. But as the oldest, I was always charged with the responsibility to look out for my baby brother, keep up with. And when this happened, I just felt that, I don't know if we call it guilt, but the responsibility again of why wasn't I there to protect him, to keep this from happening. And again, the grief I had was just completely unbearable. And at the funeral, I wondered how could I possibly go on living? But 3 days after my brother's funeral, Donnie came back to me while I was driving. And ironically enough, it was while I was driving his personal truck. He was killed in a company truck. But I had stayed on in my hometown to help my parents with flowers and things of that nature. And so that's why I was using his personal truck to help take care of some things for my parents. And so that Wednesday, while I was driving my brother's truck, like I said, I was driving to my grandparents' house. And this trip takes about 10 to 15 minutes. Again, I was by myself. And then halfway there, as I'm driving along, this very strange thing began happening to me. I suddenly developed 360-degree vision. I could see everything around me as I was driving. And at that moment that I realized this was happening, then I became aware of someone just behind me on my right side with his hand on my shoulder. And then I saw that it was Donnie. And I could hear him speaking telepathically to me. And his body was made up of a series of what I call light points. And I always like to say that it reminded me of people that were transported on Star Trek whenever they get in that machine. That's how it appeared to me. And my brother told me not to be sad, that he wanted me to be happy. And most of all, he wanted me to know a little bit of what life was like for him now. And he explained to me that he was on another plane of being and that it had simply been time for him to go. And at this point, I became aware that I was no longer in my body, but existed only in a state of consciousness. And I was no longer aware of driving at all. Instead, I saw kind of this landscape very briefly that I can only describe as like seeing outlines of trees and countryside. But after that, my entire focus was on experiencing infinity and eternity. Throughout this entire experience, my brother stayed with me. But I felt with no body that I didn't feel restricted any longer. I felt that I was one with the universe and totally one with peace. And I was also one with all knowledge in the universe. But most of all, I was one with this energy of love or spirit. And that is everything in the universe. I was one with everything that exists. And we are all one with this energy of love and everything else as well. And I understood at that point that spirit, this love, is the all-encompassing, all-caring, and creative element of the universe. And I was it. I was one with that, out in the middle of the universe. That's why I like to use the background that I have for these presentations, because that's what it looked like for me. I was just out in the middle of the universe. But I understood completely in being in this oneness state that there is absolutely no separation of anything from this all-encompassing spirit, even though we feel like we're not connected. But what we have to do is really open up to this, what I call supreme consciousness and love, and into our own consciousness, allow that and experience it. And everything and everyone is the spirit of universal love. And everything is connected throughout the entire universe. And that is what I fully experienced, was being one with everything. This was the truth that I experienced of who we are. And I loved being in this state of being, this consciousness only, this freedom that I was feeling. And I did not want to go back to my body, to my life. I just wanted to stay where I was and being part of the oneness. And I felt that it was just the natural state. But I had no desire to do anything else except to experience more of this state of being, because it was home to me. And that was the main feeling that I got from this, is that I was home. And my brother was right there with me throughout this experience that was happening to me. And I feel sure that my brother did share more information to me, but I did not remember that after I returned to my body. And I now think that I was not really meant to recall some of the information that I received when I was out of body with this. And that perhaps it was sharing information with me about some future events in my life. But as I desired to be deeper into this experience, I suddenly began, the only way I know to describe it is I felt as though I was just whooshing away very rapidly. And I could actually hear this rushing sound as I began moving very swiftly away. But within an instant of that happening, I felt my brother's energy or spirit pushing down on, I'll say, pushing down on where my shoulder was associated with my physical form. And Donnie said to me very clearly, he said, "No, you can't go yet. It isn't your time." And with a feeling of, I can only describe as like a thud, I suddenly landed back into my physical body. And I could actually see myself coming back down and going through the roof of the truck and then landing back in my body. And when I landed back in my body, I realized that somehow throughout that experience, I actually had managed to make the turn on this road that actually led to my grandparents. But, to this day, I don't have any recollection of driving and doing it. But when I returned to my body, I just felt so happy. And I was just so at peace for the rest of the day. And when I got to my grandparents' house, I could see how it was almost like looking through my brother's eyes. I could see how sad my grandparents were, because, of course, they were grieving the death of my brother. And I could see how those who are on the other side, they see that grief, but they don't want us to be sad. And so that was kind of my viewpoint for the rest of the day. But again, after that day was gone, I fell back into this very deep grief for my brother, even though I understood that he was still alive and, I'll say, on the other side. But I just missed him so much. But after that, my life, my consciousness, my view of life on earth was never the same. And I continued to have, I'll say, after-death communications and other strange events that really happened to me for the rest of my life. But I continued to have in different ways an outreach from my brother. For example, at the time, my husband and I lived in Sugar Land, which is near Houston. And one day after I'd come home from work, I was walking out of the bedroom and I glanced into the living room and I actually saw my brother in there. Now, he wasn't looking at me. He was actually looking into our stereo cabinet. He had lived with us one summer there. But that lasted only an instant. But a lot of times I would come home from work, and in our dining room, which we hardly ever went in there to eat, we usually ate at our little breakfast. But I would come home and I would find this chair, this one chair that my brother sat in when he lived with us one summer. We used to eat in the bigger dining room, and that chair would be pulled out, and I would put it back under the table. And I asked my husband, was he going in there and sitting down at the table? And he said, no. So that continued happening for as long as we lived in that house. And another time, my husband and I were sitting in our small TV room watching television, and this video that was in this bookcase, there were two big bookcases in there. This video came flying out across the room and landed at our feet. And again, it was related to my brother, because when he lived there that summer, he and my husband, they would mess around with this video camera and just do crazy stuff. And so that video was just kind of a reminder about. Another time I came home from work, and when I rounded the corner to go down the hallway, I saw where this book was lying across the hallway from this small built-in bookcase there. And this book had come from the lowest segment of that bookcase, and you could see that it had flown across the hallway. And I knew again that that was probably just the energy from my brother, letting me know that he was, he was wanting to help me through the grief, I think, is why these things happen. Another time when I came home, I again was going to the bedroom, and there a chair had been placed in the center of the doorway leading into the bedroom. And I thought someone was in the house. And I immediately went back out the front door, and I waited outside for a long time. Nothing happened. I went back in. I finally just said, well, all I can surmise is this was another example of Donnie doing something to let me know he's around. And I moved the chair back under the desk that was in there. And my dad and his wife would tell about hearing microwave buttons going off in the middle of the night at their house after my brother's death. And they figured it was Donnie also, because he used to come over to their house and help himself to food and heat up the food in the microwave there. And then my mother, she had a dream that was kind of this encounter with this deer. And she said, when this deer walked up to her in the dream, she knew that it was Donnie. And she said to him in the dream, son, you need to come back to me right now. And the deer said to her, Mama, I can't come back now. And then he just turned and slowly walked away. So, we did have this outreach from my brother that was happening not just to me, but to others in my family as well. And I also received guidance about 3 months after my brother's death that related to me saving my family from carbon monoxide poisoning. Somehow I got the message, this was at my dad and his wife's house, but I knew that there was something wrong in that house. And I literally crawled on the carpet to the front door and opened the door to let, it was very cold too, but to let this air in for the rest of the night, which saved us from dying from carbon monoxide poisoning. But again, this was not something that I just knew. It was something that I was being directed about, which I think it was my brother. And I also had intuition and knowing in my life, in my business career as well. And I also developed electromagnetic effects In other words, at night, when I would walk down the street lights would go out as I got near them. And then as I walked past them, the lights would come back on. And I heard other people say that they've had experiences like that. I see someone nodding their head, so they know what I'm talking about. It's like for whatever reason, your energy is different and it impacts something like a street light. Maybe the wildest experience that I had was seeing this friend of mine just spontaneously develop this giant purple aura around her. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And that day, my friend received her powers as a healer. After that, she became a healer. And I saw that the day that it happened. And so more recently in my life, if a person is talking with me about the loss of a loved one, then sometimes I've suddenly been visited by that loved one while I'm speaking to them, and they provide to me messages sometime to give to this person that I'm speaking to. So I've had things like that happen as well. So I continue to integrate results of this experience and these other experiences into my life. And, my goal is to share the story, help others, open our lives to a greater understanding of love and the most important idea of being the oneness, and how love is all there is in terms of that oneness. And that is with us always. So after that, I decided to develop this little, well, it's really a visualization versus meditation, but it's called Meld into Spirit Technique, or MIST. And so this visualization is about keeping your eyes open, and you focus on and connect through your heart center. And it's about being the oneness of spirit, or the universal energy of love, so that it enables you to somehow recapture that sense of oneness wherever you are. And so I think of this process as though you're doing something through a microscope. But I'm going to just go through some of this visualization, and just to give you an idea of what I mean about trying to just connect with your eyes open and being this meld into spirit technique. So now in your mind's eye, imagine and see everything around you is just blurring and blending together. There are no more edges to anything. Everything is becoming all the same white light, particles of light floating and merging. Now imagine the light expanding out beyond Earth, further and further out into the entire infinite universe, encompassing all. Everything becomes the light and on out into infinity. And as you're seeing this process continue, feel how easy it is to let go of all judgment of people, of issues, of life. It all falls away and it's released easily and completely. And when we feel through our heart completely free, then we easily experience being one with the universal consciousness of spirit, of the all that is. Just relax into that supportive, loving feeling. There's no separation of any. You are safe. You are loved. Left behind are any human, earthly worries. We are now completely one with the love, the light, the universal consciousness as are all things. Feel that freedom, the wholeness, the peace that passes all understanding. No separation of any. This is home, the all that is. All is well, always has been, and always will be in the space of oneness. Now, I have that meditation on my website. If you go to the blog, you can hear the recorded version of that. And if you take time to really center into that, it is truly, you get into that, you can feel and be that oneness. And I think that taking time out of our lives to potentially get into that state of being can make such a huge difference for us. And I would, encourage you to try getting into that space. Again, I love it because it's done with your eyes open, and it's really about seeing the light and the oneness with everything that's around us. And that does bring comfort to our well-being while we're here on earth. So I, again, invite you to go to my website. It's on the blog there, and experience that for yourself. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Thank you. If everyone could just type any questions that you have in the chat, and then we'll go through them to ask Paula. And my first question is about, you left your body while you're driving the truck, right?
Yes. You'd be surprised how many people that of me the very first thing.
Yeah. I mean, that had to blow your mind that some part of you was still able to drive the truck.
And that's what people ask me, like, well, how do you think you were driving the truck? And yeah, I think that just the human part of me was somehow able to take that over, while the spiritual part of me was released, and I was out in the universe. But yeah, that is a good question, and something I still ponder even to this day. How did I do that? Because I did not have any recollection of driving and making the turn onto the road that led me to my grandparents. But obviously, somehow I did that. But yeah.
And it's just so amazing. And then to keep relatively silent about it. And you're walking down the street and lights are blowing out, but you are in fear of sharing any of this because everybody thinks you might be crazy.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, um, it's, as I said, I just did not talk about this. And I had one or two really close friends that I did tell them some of these things, but it just wasn't something that I really talked about much at all. And until I retired in 2016, um, then suddenly I just decided that it was time for me to share this other side of my life in terms of what had happened to me. And, probably within a month or two of having retired, I just sat down at my computer and started typing. And less than a year later, I had completed it and I had it published. And and through IANDS, I've been a speaker about my experiences. But it was very, well, let me say this. When I wrote the book and published it and really felt free, I'll say, to talk about it, it was really the first time that I could feel authentic as who I am. Because, I just had not shared that side of what all had happened to me and continued to be that way, for the rest of my life. But once I was able to share it and get it out there, I felt so whole as a person. And I didn't have any more qualms about telling people about what had happened to me because I just thought, well, if people want to think I'm crazy, well, they're just going to have to think that, or they don't believe me or whatever. It just doesn't matter to me now, face it, because what I speak is the truth and what happened to me. And I still have experiences. I mean, I can tell you that just a couple of months ago, right here in this office, from my home office, sitting here looking at the computer. No one else was in the house. And all of a sudden, this book from the topmost shelf in here, I've got two bookcases in here, just went flying out of the top shelf across the room. Of course, it kind of scared me, but I stood up and I said, "Cut it out, Donnie. I know that's you," because it is. And he just wants to check in and harass me because that's the way we were when we grew up together. We were always, you know, doing stuff like that to each other, playing tricks. And some people can think I'm crazy or making that up or whatever, but I just consider it a visit from my brother, and life goes on.
So when you passed, you talked about, about guilt, but, a lot of times we have, for not being there or whatever. So when you then had the experience with him and got to see the 360 view, what happened to those feelings of guilt? How did you feel after that?
I was released from that because I was shown by this out of body experience I had. I was shown the big picture, I guess you could say, and just realized, that this was just a part of who we are, but so many people don't get a chance to experience things like that, to get that change in consciousness, I'll say, the expanded consciousness and understanding of how things are. And it just made a huge difference for me. But again, not everyone gets that kind of, I'll say, conscious expanding experience. And it just made such a huge difference. I mean, I still miss my brother, and I wrote my book about a lot of these things, driving into infinity, living with my brother's spirit, and sharing some of these wild and crazy things that happened. But again, That whole thing, at the end of the day, I was finally able to feel authentic again as a person, being out there with saying, this is who I am, this is what happened. You can either believe it or not believe it. And in the meantime, life goes on and I share and I help people. So for me, it's all good.
Yeah. Yeah, that 360-degree view to me is so important because it replaces what we would call forgiveness down here. Once we see the whole picture, we can forgive others and ourselves. So I always love, to hear about that, people's
Yeah,
experiences.
that's really true. It's just a different viewpoint. It's mind changing, consciousness changing to have an experience like that. And again, I like the background that I have for these interviews that I have, because that is what I saw when I was with my brother taken into the universe. And so whenever I see this background and I'm talking about this, it reminds me of those moments out in the universe. And it's hard to even put into words how that completely, as I've said before in this presentation, completely changes your consciousness and understanding, just because you end up having that kind of experience. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. But of course, that was with my deceased brother, and had to go on in life not having him in my life. And for that, there's always a missing element in my life because he's not here physically. Again, I have a sister, and she's 10 years younger, and so she didn't have the same kinds of experiences I did growing up with. But
What do other family members think about you having this experience? But they've all had some experiences with him, right? Or is there some that haven't?
well, I don't know that my sister has had any. Definitely my dad and his wife, they were sure that it was, Donnie in there with the machinery, the microwave buttons going off. Both of them are deceased, but they did acknowledge that, they felt that it was him. I'm trying to think if my mother ever, she's in assisted living now and she has dementia, but I'm not sure well, the one thing I do recall she told me was that she did have a dream. And the dream that she had was this deer who came to her. And this deer walked up to her and she said she knew that it was Donnie. And she looked at the deer and she said, Donnie, you need to come back to me right now. You need to come home to me. And the deer said to her, Mama, I can't come home. I'm happy now where I am. And she repeated again to him, son, you need to come home to me. And he just said, Mama, I can't. And she said, then at that point, he turned around and walked off and disappeared. And so, it's amazing on one hand that my whole family seemed to have some kind of outreach from my brother. But if you had known my brother, you would understand that was so like him. He was such a great guy, really sweet. And, like I said, he had a lot of friends. And I never knew him to be mean to anyone. And he was always helpful. And so, it's not really surprising to me that he did manage to reach out to all of us in certain ways. And, we were all grateful. And of course, like I said, my dad and his wife are deceased. My mom, she's in assisted living now. She has dementia. And so really that just leaves my sister and I. So, you know, and that's what happens in life.
So do you have any suggestions for people who would like to try to connect with their loved ones, and maybe what signs they might look out for?
Yeah, I think if you just take some time to yourself, whether that's walking around in a park or someplace where you just feel calm, or if it's outdoors, or even if it's your home office or something where you sit and read or something, get in a place where it's someplace you really like to be, and you feel that the energy is enhancing for you. And just I would say just talk to everyone, reach out to them. You could probably even ask them for a sign that they might be around. I didn't really try that myself, but because I already had things that were overtly happening. But I I don't see anything wrong with making that effort to reach out. And you never know what'll come back. Because I do believe, just like with my brother, I do believe that um, people who have crossed over on the other side, that they can hear us if we're reaching out to them, or feel our energy or something. And I'm not sure quite the process that they may feel, but I don't think there's anything wrong with it to reach out and just say, give me a sign. I don't know that always works. Maybe someone who's crossed over doesn't really want to be here, or show up again in the earth arena for whatever reason, but that's okay too. But I don't think it hurts anything to talk to them and reach out. That's my feeling. But maybe some
And
other,
it took 3 days for your brother to come to you, right? Was that 3 days when you had that out of body, or how long was it
yeah,
after you passed?
um that was probably actually 5 days. Um and Yeah, because that was a Friday, and I think that I had that experience with him on a Wednesday when I was still up in my hometown. So, it was several days. Um, but there was a moment when, maybe within the first 3 days, I was at my dad and his wife's house, and I was just crying my eyes out, and just, because it was within the first 3 days. But as I sat there, I felt that my brother was hovering above me, like near the ceiling. Now, I didn't see that, but I felt that energy. Again, that was probably within the first 3 days um, of his death, when I was at my dad's house. And, and then all these other things happened along the way after that. But that was probably the first instant that I I felt like he was around. And, you know, um, he's still around here and there, as I said, for me, doing tricks. But it's not like he's here all the time, right? I think he just checks in here and there. And I'm okay with that. Mhm. And he doesn't want to be here all the time. I mean, he's where he's supposed to be. So I think if people just allow themselves to feel whatever it is they're going to feel, and if they want to reach out to their loved one, um, I personally don't see anything wrong with that. Now, some people might say or believe that that's not a good thing to do, or whatever. And it's not like, you want them to be here all the time, because they are where they're supposed to be. And And so we need to allow that at some level. But again, I think you can reach out to them energetically and connect.
Do you talk to your brother now? Do you have conversations with him now?
I wouldn't say I have conversations with him, but here and there I do think about him. And I've got, pictures here of all different kinds of family pictures here in this bookcase. It's across from my desk. And I do look at those sometimes and think about some of the crazy stuff that we did. And, I do take sort of that trip down memory lane here and there, just because he was and is my brother. And, I experienced a lot of life with him. Why should I just try to block that out? I think it's good for people to take some time along the way to make that reconnection with the person who's moved on, and just feel that energy again, and be grateful that you had whatever time with that person that you did. That's the way I feel.
And how about so the paranormal after death communication with other people, and also the energy effects? Does all that still occur for you? Do you still blow out light post every once in a while?
Yeah. Um, you know, there are times when I still can feel energies, or around me, or things will happen, and then I know that there's energies like that around me. But pretty much I try to just, it's not like I'm trying to reach out to spirits all the time. I think it's more a case of sometimes just being somewhere and kind of feeling that energy that could be there. But I don't really make it a practice to do that. I just figure, well, if something somehow shows up to me, then I'll acknowledge it, but I'm not going to delve all in. But there are people
So
who spend time, trying to make connections like that.
So we have a really good question from Daniel, who his mother had a shared death experience with her sister, and then experienced a lot of loneliness after. Did you, even though you'd had this amazing experience, did you feel loneliness with this loss, or how did you feel? How did you cope with it?
Well, I felt really wonderful having that experience with my brother. And personally, that is the thing that I'll say hark back to here and there, those moments out in the universe with him. And that brings me comfort and joy that I was able to experience that. But, like my dad is deceased, I don't really reach out to him like that or try to have experiences. Really, I've not tried that with, any other people. And the thing of it is, with my brother, it kind of occurred naturally, and it didn't frighten me or anything like that. But it's not like I try to live in that world all the time, making that connection. But again, here and there, I know that some of the things that happen in here, that he's just around, just to let me know he's still checking in with. I mean, like, like I said, this one bookcase here, it's really tall. This book came flying out clear across the room. And I stood up from my desk and I said, "Cut it out, Donnie. I know that's you." Because it was all quiet in this office. I was sitting here looking at the computer. Nothing else was going on. Nobody else was here. And then whammo. And so it was almost like after I said that to him out loud, it was almost as though I could just envision, I'll say, him just laughing at me because growing up together, that's the kind of junk that we did. It would have been typical of him to just try to, I'll say, scare me to some degree. But that's okay. That was his personality. And I appreciate that. But again, that doesn't happen all the time around here at all. So when something like that does happen, I know it's definitely, I'm somebody fears that, oh, it's some strange ghost or something. But it's made life interesting for me, and people can believe or not believe me. And it's like, this is what happened. This is what I experienced. This is what I know to be true. But, it's not a question to me of having to convince people. It's like, I'm just sharing this. And if that resonates with you, well, great. If it brings you comfort and understanding in relation to your own situation with those who have passed, then that's even better for me. That's the way I feel about it. So
I like how you're very grounded in it, in your experience. That's, it's sometimes it's hard to share our experiences and with everybody. So I really love. So there is a comment that perhaps Paula can ask her brother to help in cold cases like the one in Moscow, Idaho, or one in Reno. You ever thought about that?
That perhaps it could help with what? My
cold cases. So like, when missing people cases.
Yeah, well, that would take a lot of time. I'd have to want to be some kind of super detective.
Right. Yeah. You're not wanting to be a detective right now.
Yeah. Besides, who knows, at the level where my brother is right now, who knows what they're involved in anyway, in terms of, we don't, I'm sure there are people who have been to different levels of the afterlife, I'll say. Not that I have, but so I don't have an understanding of what all may be going on in those afterlife levels. Maybe they're busy all the time or stuff. I don't know. I don't have any idea about that, but I'm just like, well, let them be doing what they need to be doing, and I'm going to do what I need to do here on earth. And
right.
Eventually I'll get there. So,
yeah,
it's all okay.
I like that. Okay, so AJ asks, I have noticed that unity experiences or oneness experiences are usually accompanied with a 360-degree vision, as you mentioned, and is usually present in many near-death experiences. In one of my oneness experiences, I could see white light glowing in all directions at the same time, up and down, to the right, to the left, and everything emancipating from my heart. Now, my question is the following: when you practice your meld into spirit meditation, do you basically try to imagine back in that space and feeling of oneness, your heart? Let's see. How long do you usually remain in that state, and what benefits have you personally noticed?
Yeah, to answer your question on that, the first part, yes, I do try to get myself back into that space, that feeling of that oneness that I experienced, and just letting go of, I'll say, the hard edges of looking at reality, just letting that go and just being in that space of just spirit and connecting, yes, with that oneness again, that feeling. And that is a really great thing to do, because, well, there's so much stuff we have to deal with in life. And if you're able to reach that point where you can let that go and get your consciousness into the space of imagining even that you're out in the middle of the universe, and that's what you're seeing, and then letting just the feelings come in of being the stars and in that space, that universal space, just really enables you to let go of, I'll say, all the hard edges of life that we experience every day. Now, I don't get into that space every day as far as experiencing the oneness. I'm just like everybody else. I get busy, I got to do this, I got to do that. But then at some point I sort of come out of that and I'm like, I have to get out of here. I have to go walk. I have to reconnect somehow with my inner spirit and knowingness. And I think that's what it takes to help us in this lifetime to be able to take some time to at least try to experience and become that oneness, and just let everything go, or imagine everything blending together. And so that all these hard edges of everything just, go away. And you're just in that space of blendedness, you could call it. And it's just amazing what a difference it can make in how you feel. But again, I'm just like everybody else, I get to day after day just kind of doing what I'm supposed to be doing, getting all this stuff done. And then one day I'll say, "Hey, God, I need to get out of this and get back into this oneness and feeling who we really are." And I just think it's so important to take time to do that. And even if you don't feel like the first couple of times that you're able to kind of let go of everything that's around you, I would say keep practice, because eventually you'll get there into that space where you really released all that. And again, I just try to imagine I'm out in the middle of the universe, just out there, and just let that energy come into me. It's a different energy feeling, but it's great. It's great to just let go of the hard edges of being in this life and getting to the point where you can really be and experience spirit, which is what we all are. So I would just recommend that people try it.
And that does help open us up to hearing from our loved ones also when we get in that space. Was it hard for you to integrate? So after you'd had this out of body experience and you'd had all these amazing experiences with your brother, you now see a 360-degree view of the world. You see it completely different. Was it hard to go back to being a businesswoman and all of that stuff that seems probably a little less important?
Well, I would say that in one answer, the answer is yes. It was hard to go back, into the world the way it is, especially after my brother died. And even though I'd had that experience with him, I mean, I have to admit and say, even though I had that experience not very long after his death, I fell back into very deep grief about him, even though I had had that experience. And I think that that's just a product of being human. And it's a product of loving people. When you love people in your life and now they're gone permanently from this lifetime, that is a very hard thing for a human being to assimilate into their life for the rest of their life. I mean, it's not just about, oh, a couple of weeks, he's gone. No, for the rest of my life, I'm never going to see him again in the way that we were in this life. It's hard. It's very hard. But I think it's just so important to try and let go of the things around us and just get into that space where we are experiencing the oneness and the goodness of life and love. But I do think it takes some concentration in the beginning. Like, I feel like it's a lot easier for me now because I've been doing that for a long time. But and that being in that oneness again too, it does take the hard edges off of having lost my brother, because I feel like in that space that I can connect more with his energy also.
So, what would you say to people that are really grieving their loved ones, and that you have learned now from your brother? What does that grief do, that when they can tell that we're in grief? What would be your message to people that are just can't get over the grief?
Yeah, I get that. It took me such a long time to move beyond that terrible, terrible grief. Like I say, in my mind, especially at the age I was at 30, those kinds of things just happen to other people. I was never going to happen to me, but it did. And it was not an easy journey out of that space of being completely swallowed up by grief. And it took quite a while, but eventually I got there. And, I still have moments when I just cry because he's not here. Now, those are few and far between, but I think that's just a product of we're human beings. And when you love people, you're always going to have those moments when it's just a terrible thing that they're not here with. So I think we just have to accept that might always come back. Now, some people may be able to just accept, well, they're on the other side and I'm going to be with them someday and so on. And that's great, but everybody's different. And, for me, there's never a time and space where I could totally just let that go and just say, oh, well, it's okay, because I would still rather that my brother be here. I don't like that he has been gone all these years. and that for however long I still have on this earth, I'm still not going to see him here. And because I view it as, think of all the great times we could have had, even beyond the ones that we did have when he was here. I just think that it's the humanness in us that wants to have those human experiences. So,
But they don't like it when we're grieving, right? Like he doesn't like it when you're grieving. Yeah.
I think that's true, that people on the other side don't want us grieving. Nevertheless, they're in spirit form and we're not. We're here in
Right.
form. And that brings with it emotions and things that as a spirit, you're not concerned with. And because you're part of that oneness, which is beyond words how to explain how complete that makes you feel, makes you as a complete person or spirit, as the case may be. But yeah, I think as human beings, we have to be kind to ourselves and just say, this is the way it is. And if I feel like grieving, then that's okay too. It's all part of the love. And we just have to accept that and live through it. And finally, one day you get to the point where it's not as horrible as it used to be for you. It's always going to be not a good thing, though, but at least you won't be in that space of complete and utter despair, and which is such a horrible place to be. And but that's what happens when you love people. When it comes from the heart, you're going to be hurt, and you're going to miss them. And some people handle that better than others. For myself, I just somehow managed finally after a long time to get through it. But it was not an easy, nice process for me at all. And everybody's different. Some people accept it more easily, but I just said, this is who I am. I can't deal with it any other way. And I love people in my life. Then I don't want them to go away. I want them to be part of my life and part of the fun and this and that, because that's who I am. But other people handle it differently. But you just have to forgive yourself and say, it's the way it is. And if somebody does, somebody doesn't like it or they want me to stop breathing, well, that's their issue, not mine. I'm dealing with it the best way I know how. So we have to be kind to ourselves.
Yeah. Great answer. I love how honest you are about it, because a lot of people don't necessarily admit, even having, they've had these amazing experiences and they don't admit that, they still really miss the physical form. So Daniel wants to know, do you experience lucid dreaming? And if so, do you have a strong recall of the content of those dreams? And if so, do you find the content beneficial to your life experiences in the present?
I wouldn't say I've had lucid dreaming. I have had experiences where it's almost like going into a different reality and seeing things. Some of that has come through dreams, though, but some of it hasn't. It's like being transported somewhere and seeing things. But I haven't had that happen very often. And so I don't know. You just, I say deal with it as you can and accept what you can. And
David says, and I just want to echo how much we all appreciate your wisdom and your authenticity. That you're not trying to be a big guru. You're just, you're sharing your experiences and your story, and that's always so refreshing and welcoming to hear. Just such authenticity. So I wanted to make sure to mention that.
Thank you very much. Well, I just feel very strongly about trying to reach out to people and help them and just be real about it. And that's really what it's about for me. And
so what would you say are the main takeaways your experience with your brother?
Well, first of all, the idea is that everyone lives beyond what we know as death. I mean, there's no question about that. It's just a transitioning into a different mode of being. It's like we don't die ever. It's like we're spirit, and who we are, the essence of who we are, I think and believe, lives on forever. It's not like we die, we go to the other side, and we're there for a while, and then we just cease to exist. That isn't it. I'm certain of that. So that's first. The other observation I would have is on grief, and that those who have crossed over to the other side, they see us so sad, but they really desperately want us to be happy. And they want us to know that they live on. But of course, as human beings, and when we love people, we are going to be experiencing grief, and sometimes it blocks out those realizations. But having had this whole experience with my brother, this out of body deal, it really initiated for me a new path of spiritual discovery. So sometimes you have to look for the good and beneficial that comes from death and sadness and terrible things that may happen in our lives. And it may not be apparent to you from the very beginning or something like that. But later, it leads you into this discovery path for yourself, and enables you to grow if you're willing to go there. Enables you to grow as a person and spiritually. I put together some questions in relation to that. It's like, well, what had happened? And then had this kind of experience happen to others? And how could I incorporate my new understanding of so-called death into my everyday living? So I think we have to stop and take time to think about those issues. And that's another thing I think that death does for us at some level beyond the grief. We grow and we learn things for our own growth. And I think that's an important aspect to grasp and carry with you.
Yeah. Well, do we have any more questions from anyone? This has been such an amazing night and so perfect for the holidays. I'm just so grateful for you to come and share your wisdom with us. And I want to remind everyone, you can check out Paula's book if you go to paulalenzauthor.com and hear more of her amazing story. And also to invite you all on December 20th, we'll have our sharing group, and hopefully you can all join us. And with that, I want to wish everyone a happy holidays. And again, thank you so much, Paula. Thank you for Lorelei for helping. I guess Susan didn't make it. Thank you, Stephen, for the amazing meditation. And we will see you all soon. So have a great night.
Thank you so much again. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Loved it.